Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that really helps to get my channel promoted, and I really appreciate it. I also love it when you leave comments, so leave me a comment if you want to. Today I want to make a pendant, and I thought I'd do something sort of elegant and dainty. It should be a really pretty piece when I'm done, at least I hope so anyway. I picked out a little 5mm garnet. At first it was so sparkly I thought it was a CZ maybe, but no, it's a garnet. I looked at it under magnification. So we'll put that together and see how it comes out, but before we do, I wanted to thank some groups of people. In particular, I wanted to thank my patrons over on Patreon. And I have a new patron, Sharon S. Thank you for signing up. I really appreciate your support. I think you will find that the group of people on Patreon over there is a super nice group with a lot of knowledge, and I hope you learn as much from them as I have. Thank you for your support. I really appreciate it, as well as you previous patrons. Thanks for that too. The other group that I wanted to thank are my YouTube subscribers. We just passed 10,800, which is awesome. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate not only the kind comments that you leave in the comments section, I truly appreciate the contributions like the Buy Me a Coffee or the Super Thanks. That really helps with supplies, especially since they've been going up in price lately. So thanks for that. All right, let's get started on this project. These are a couple of my design idea books. They're available in my merch store. I find them super useful anymore when I'm drawing up a plan for what I'm going to make for the day. I used to not do this, but anymore it produces a much better outcome if I do a little sketch first. So you might want to consider getting one of these. They have a little graph in the background that makes it easier to keep things symmetrical, which I'm not great at. So let me show you the garnet here. You see, it's got some nice color and quite a bit of fire to it. So it's 5mm, round, brilliant. That's going to be our stone. It's going to be going right down here. I'll be making a little 3-prong setting for it to hold it in place with a platform that the prongs are mounted to, which is going to be made out of 16-gauge square wire. I think I'm going to use 8-gauge half round to make this, and I'm going to taper it pretty seriously with the file. I'm also going to use 8-gauge half round for this. The prongs and the ring here will probably be 18-gauge round sterling, and I think that's probably all the materials we'll need. In most of my videos I use hard silver sheet solder exclusively and a spray-on flux called My-T-Flux. Although I have some new flux I'm going to try out pretty soon here, so stay tuned for that. My torch is a Silversmith torch, which is their acetylene air model, so it draws in air through these little holes. Only one tank, just the acetylene. It's a great torch, and I like it a lot. I use a #1 tip on it. I'm just going through and answering some questions that people ask me all the time to preemptively answer them for you. So I think the first thing we're going to do is make that little piece that's going to become our setting for the stone, and we'll start with that. And like I said, I'm going to use 16-gauge square wire. This was 14, but I pulled it through a draw plate a few times to make it smaller, so it's about 16. And what I need to do here, I want to have this just a tiny bit bigger than the stone so that I have space to mount these little prongs on top of it and still get the stone in there. I'm also, once I make this into a circle that's the right size, I'm going to taper it inwards a little bit with a burr on my Dremel, probably a diamond burr. We'll see what works best, but we'll do that, and then we'll mount those prongs on there, and then we'll start working on this. So let's do that first. Square wire, when you bend it, has a tendency to twist on you, so we're going to have to try and control that twist as we do this. That's looking pretty good. Let's cut it off and see how it looks. Take this end off here. I'm going to take a moment and file these ends. Even though those cut flush, they don't cut perfectly, so there's almost always a little bit of a mark there that I need to remove. Let's see how this sits on there. That's a pretty good size. I wanted a little bit of space on the outside for the prongs to be mounted. So I'm going to go with that. We'll solder that closed. And that'll be our first step as far as soldering goes. So let's put him way over there so I don't lose him. Once I solder this, I'll file it all flat so it looks all nice. Somebody the other day sent me this. I'm not sure who sent it to me, but thank you for that. It's nice to have a little eyedropper kind of thing instead of just a spray bottle. Sometimes it's nice to be able to dribble rather than spray. Alright. Cut a little bit of solder here. This is hard silver sheet solder. These are Fisker's craft shears. I get asked about those a lot. They're pretty easy to find. They work really well up to about 18 gauge. And then it starts becoming too thick for those to cut. Yeah, just a little bit more. Alright, cool that off. I have a few new soldering picks I'm going to try out today. If you've never seen pick soldering, I do that a lot. It's where you pick up a little bit of solder on the end of your pick. It's usually a titanium needle coming out of a handle, and you pick it up and you can place it really precisely. It's a good way to control how much and where your solder is going. And so if you're interested, I have a video where I made about how to do that, so it might be worth checking out. I'm going to file this flat. I'm going to use a little bit of tape to hold on to it. One of my frequent commenters suggested I put a piece of sandpaper on the table and glue it down or tape it down. I haven't gotten around to that yet, but that's a good idea for flattening things like this. Trying to hold a little ring like that is kind of challenging. I have some exciting news coming up pretty soon that I can't quite announce yet, but you may notice some clues throughout the video. pretty good. Okay, I'm just going to take, like I said, a burr and taper this so it has maybe a 45-degree angle going down inside of it. So I'll be right back. Apologies for my mess here. I just put a little, about a kind of a big ball burr on here and clamped it in there. We'll see if that works. I do it with my drill because it goes slower than my rotary tool. And I get a little bit better control. That looks pretty good. Okay, we'll go back and keep working. It's probably going to be kind of hard to see here, but there's kind of a little taper down inward, so the stone should, in theory, sit in there nicely. Flip it around. Gonna turn upside down on me always. That looks pretty good. Okay, so now we need to make some little prongs that will mount on there. I'll show you how I'm going to do that. Let's find some 18 gauge round wire. Well, there's a piece of it right there. Okay. So I'm going to make, since I want a 3-prong setting, I want it to be at about 60-degree angles. Is it 60 or is it 120? All the way around a circle is 360, I think, so 120 on each one. I always get my geometry mixed up. Doesn't need to be super long, but make kind of a V shape like that. And this is about 19, so I'll do about 19 this way too. Doesn't have to be perfect. That was just arbitrary as far as deciding how long those need to be, because really I'm going to make a tent out of the 3 prongs sitting on top of this. We'll solder it down so that there's 3 evenly spaced prongs on there sticking up from that. And we're going to do it right on the border of the edge there, kind of at the top of the edge. So let's do this. Okay, and I got some little pieces of solder here. I'm going to pick solder this so you'll see that. So we'll just pick up a little bit of solder like this. Heat this whole thing to the soldering temperature. Let's touch it right on. Okay, you want to kind of get it lined up so it's the right configuration. I wonder if I have a piece of this already. Polar graph paper is this stuff. It's super handy. So if I want to get it even, I'm going to go like, let's see, there's 30, 60, 90, 120. So this one right here, this one right here, and then 30, 60, 90, 120. So those ones from the center, and then I can just make the bends so it's a little bit shallower. That's pretty close. I used to try and use a protractor to do all that, so it's kind of hard to do little tiny measurements. That stuff's pretty handy, I think. Okay, so let's go very far in. I'm trying to think about how far out to the edge it is from there, so I'm going to use the pliers as kind of a guide and just bend these straight up and down. And in order to get these to sit flat, I'm going to cut these off so they're all about the same length. So we're still way wide there. Bend these inwards a little bit. Still a little wood, just a little bit more. Sometimes a little slight difference can make a big difference in the way it looks, so I'm going to take quite a bit of care when I get these mounted. We don't want it to look wonky. I'm going to go with that, I think. Okay. I got this new soldering pick I'm going to try out. See how it works. So I'm going to leave this connected for now, but we need to cut our piece of half-round wire, and in order to find out how big that piece is, I might take another piece of some other kind of wire that's a little bit easier to bend. This is another reason I like to draw things out, because I can use it then as a template for how big a piece is of stuff to cut. That's pretty close about right there. So I'm going to use that as a guide, and then I'll cut it slightly longer so I have plenty to work with. I'm going to file this to a taper on either end so it gradually, it's biggest down here and then gets skinnier up here. So this is going to take a little while, so I'm probably not going to make you watch me file the entire thing. But let's cut a piece off here. I'm going to file the edge. I thought about using square wire for this, but I wanted it to have kind of a rounded front to give it some, catch the light differently than square wire would. Okay, I'm going to continue filing this till it's ready, but I'm not going to make you watch me do the rest of it, so I'll be right back. So I have it pretty well tapered. Let's see that against the paper here. Now the tricky part is we need this to bend the most where it's thickest down here, and since it's not going to want to bend sideways because it's thinner this way than it is this way, we're going to have to figure out a way to do that. I just realized my camera shut off on me again. So basically I just tapered this down. I'm not sure how much of it got filmed, but I tapered this down and rounded it a little bit. The next thing I'm going to do is just use my Dremel with an abrasive right wheel to thin it out a little bit so I can bend it more easily. And then that'll be our bail for this piece. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I thinned it out a little bit, so that should make it a little bit easier to shape into the shape I want. And I think I want to do it like that. These bail making pliers are super useful sometimes. So basically I've got a kind of a teardrop shaped bail that's kind of rounded on top. So what we need to do now is add a ring onto this. So let me find that 18 gauge I was using. Here's a little bit. I took a little sliver out of the jump ring. I'll probably take a little bit more and solder it to either side like that. So let me cut a little bit more out of there. So I think let's solder these two together. That looks pretty good. So let's just flux that and pick a couple of pieces on it. Then I think we can solder this in, and the last thing we'll add that on, and it should be ready to pickle. Whenever you're soldering something big to something small, the bigger piece has a lot more mass, so it takes a little bit longer to heat it up. You can kind of consider that when you're heating the piece to get it up to soldering temperature. The little piece reaches pretty fast, the big piece not as fast. Once you kind of master that, okay, have fewer problems soldering things. That looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and try and get that on there. I think that's on there. Cool that off. I'm going to pop this on here, and then I'm going to try and get these two ends together. So the good thing here is that normally you have to heat the entire piece to solder something, but I don't really want any of this other solder to flow, so I'm just going to heat just this little bale and pick it right at the end there. And it looks like I still have a piece or two there. There's some more if I need it. Still got movement. There's a pendant. Now I just need to pickle that and polish it, and then when I come back I'll be snipping these off, and then we'll get this ready to set the stone and set the stone, and then we'll take some pictures for the thumbnail and stuff. So, alright, that was a relatively fun, simple pendant. I think that's as far as prong settings go, that's an easy prong setting. So if you're interested in attempting that, if you haven't done that before, this might be a good starting place on prong settings. So, well, let's let that pickle, and I'll come back with you and we'll set that. Okay, I've got them mostly polished up. I'll need to do a little bit of cleanup here. See, I cut those prongs down shorter. They're still way longer than I need, but I'm going to go ahead and start bending these over, and then we'll snip them off shorter as we get the stone kind of held in place. I'm going to use a lot of people use different tools for this stage, but I'm going to kind of bend these in one at a time. Check to make sure the stone is sitting flat. Looks like it is. And now these are going to bump into each other. And when they do, I'm going to cut a little bit more of them off. Not the final length yet, but we can start pushing them down a little bit little bit more. My next stage is going to be to cut them off to their final length, and I usually cut them about midway up the girdle facets, which are the ones between the table facet on the top and the girdle, which is the widest part of the stone. We're going to cut them off about right. I like that. And then the last thing I'm going to do, other than maybe hit it on the polishing wheel one more time to kind of clean it up around the stone, is to use the Dremel with an abrasive white wheel to gently curve those in and shape them a little bit. And then, like I said, I'll hit it on the polishing wheel one last time, and we'll take some pictures at the end. So once I get that all finished up, that should be very pretty, I think. So, all right. Thank you. And I'll see you at the end. Okay, well that was the elongated teardrop elegant pendant. I hope you liked that. If you did, make sure to hit the like button before you leave. And also check out some of my other videos. I have about 310 videos up now, and so there's a lot of content you can peruse. And if you check out the playlist page, it makes it a little bit easier to find what you're looking for. So do that, watch a few videos, and subscribe to my channel. I'd love to have you as a subscriber. So. The other thing is, if you have any questions or comments, don't forget to leave a comment there. I'm going to be putting together a question and answer video, so if you have any questions for me, whether how I got started or techniques or why I do things the way I do, those are great topics, and I'll try to answer them in that video when I get around to it. Don't forget to check out the video description down below. There's some important links. One is about safety, and that's very important, so check that out. The other ones are ways to support the channel. There's a link to my website. There's a link to the Buy Me a Coffee if you want to give me a little cash infusion to help with supplies. There's a link to my merch store if you want to get yourself one of those nice design idea books or a funny coffee mug. Finally, there's a link to my Patreon where you can find out a little bit more about that platform and what goes on over there. So check those out. Come back again. Take care. Happy silversmithing.